So I said 2 videos ago that I wanted to explore more about the Jesperi Kotkaniemi conversation with the Carolina Hurricanes and what the Montreal Canadiens can benefit from with this. Here's the thing, when it comes to the biggest Montreal Canadiens trade chip, quote-unquote, the biggest guy that everybody is saying could be moved, whether it is to Montreal or to some other team, it is a fellow Carolina Hurricane. And of course, you're already filling in the blanks here. It's Martin Necas. So with this in mind, when it comes to Martin Necas and Jesperi Kotkaniemi, the fact is both of these guys have sort of been floating around the external trade conversation world together. Here's a tweet from HFTV that pretty much summarizes the discourse that I've seen online. I've seen a lot about Jesperi Kotkaniemi returning to Montreal in a trade with Martin Necas. I think KK still has the talent to be a middle six player, but his attitude might not be suitable with what this management group is trying to build. I wouldn't be against it if they vet that. What do you think? This tweet had 38,000 views, 100 replies, 100 likes, and as I said, this tweet is being made in response to what a whole bunch of people online are discussing and debating. If it's Martin Necas coming over to Montreal, and it's Jesperi Kotkaniemi included in the price for that, is that something that you do? Just to prove that I'm not crazy, there are a whole bunch of other tweets with a bunch of replies and a bunch of likes. Sean said this, and all the chatter about taking back KK, perhaps to make a Necas acquisition cheaper. A narrative is emerging that KK was bad in Montreal. For whatever happened to his career since, let's not act like he wasn't a very promising top 6 prospect when he was here. Another comment says, would you take KK back if it meant getting Martin Necas? And then if you go elsewhere on different social medias, the idea is brought up once in a while. So I wanted to give my 2 cents here because when it comes to the Necas trade, everybody talks about the Necas trade, whether you're a Vancouver fan, Montreal fan, Calgary fan, etc., etc. But Martin Necas is a pretty expensive asset if you think about what it is that he could be and his potential and why there's even a conversation for him to get moved in the first place. He's in his prime, he's 25 years old, and he's a very competent scorer. 70 points last year, 50 points this year, and he wants a bigger role. This is a player that if you give him that top 6 spot guaranteed and you don't put him behind Seth Jarvis, he could very well pop off, maybe even get an 80-point season. Jesperi Kotkaniemi, on the other hand, is somewhat of a negative valued asset. His contract goes on for so long, till 2030, he's making $4.8 million. Yes, he is young too, he's 23 years old, but the way his career has progressed and the fact that he has declined since the 43 points he had put up last year, it bodes very poorly for anybody trying to project Kotkaniemi as a valuable asset heading into the next few years. I'm not discrediting the idea that he can improve and he can be better. It's just, with the way things are right now, you don't want to be playing a $4 million guy on your 4th line. That's just not really the right way to manage your team. With the fact that the Carolina Hurricanes are usually stingent for money too, it makes it a lot more difficult to swallow that Jesperi Kotkaniemi exists, for lack of a better word. So, if you wanted to take Martin Necas and add Jesperi Kotkaniemi to that package and be like, okay, if we take on Kotkaniemi alongside of Martin Necas, then that means the price that we have to give you, Carolina, gets lowered. Because, look, you're devaluing the package you're giving to us. If it makes it simpler and easier to make this trade, then do you do it? I like one of the replies here on HFTV's post. If the condition to get Necas is to take Kotkaniemi back, I do it, but then I buy him out immediately. It's $800,000 per season. It's almost nothing. And that is a very bold move. It's kind of like, hey, if you take on Martin Necas as well as an extra $800,000 a year until, 2036? Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is, 2036. If you take on an $800,000 cap hit from 2030 to 2036, by the time the cap is probably in the $90, $100, $110 million range, then you can take this Martin Necas for a cheaper price. If you help us take KK off of our hands, then it makes our lives a lot easier. The idea of a Kotkaniemi buyout is so intriguing here, and we have already made our few videos going over what exactly that could look like. Elliot Friedman had a few comments saying that he thinks it could happen, and then he thinks it won't happen because there are some teams that want Kotkaniemi. And just saying, there is some sort of a need for younger talent in Montreal. You want to talk about the Docs and the Newhooks and the Zegrises and the Suzukis. Kotkaniemi is right in there in that age range. But of course, that's just assuming you want to actually use him. If you don't want to use him and you want to buy him out, then that actually might be beneficial for everybody involved. Kotkaniemi will still get some money. I mean, if you take a look at the buyout calculator right here, if he does get bought out, he'll only be making $10 million over the next few years until 2036, but it still opens the door for him to sign a bigger contract, and there isn't really this big cloud of scrutiny and criticism that could be thrown his way because he's an underperforming big money player. I'm not even saying that $4.8 million is like big money, but just kind of a lot of money for a guy of his talent. Another reply on this HFTV post goes out there and says, though, that Jesperi Kotkaniemi admitted himself that he cannot handle the pressure. HFTV replies, saying that's exactly the quote that bothers me about Kotkaniemi. It begs the question on if you can really change a player's mentality once you've hit the NHL. He's young. It could happen maybe with the right people, like Martin St. Louis, for example. And then Devil's Advocate point of view says, hey, the pressure wouldn't be high on him this time around, especially as a third center and not a third overall pick. And, you know, I get it, he's never going to not be a third overall pick, that's always going to follow him around, but you can understand that with differing circumstances, guys can exhibit different expectations upon them. Alex Galchenyuk, when he was going from team to team to team to team to team, wasn't really seen as a guy who's going to be a third overall caliber asset by the time he was on the Minnesota Wild. Everybody kind of knew that he was more so what he was. Jesperi Kotkaniemi is in a spot where now he's played pretty poorly over the past few weeks and months, and he's been scratched here and there, playing in the fourth line. If he gets traded to Montreal, nobody's expecting him to become the third overall version of Jesperi Kotkaniemi that was outproducing Barkov in his rookie year. I feel like after years and years, it's much easier for people to temper their expectations. So if it is Jesperi Kotkaniemi that brings the price on a Martin Necas down, let's say it saves you a second or 2/3 or something, is that something you consider? Do you consider it just for buying him out? Because, let me remind you, the timeline to buy out Jesperi Kotkaniemi, it's not going to last forever. The fact is, he's 23 years old right now, which means that if you bought him out right now, the savings of 2/3 the salary that he is owed, it's not going to last forever. If you wait too long to buy him out, you will be ending up spending a lot more money to him. So it is kind of intriguing to discuss what the possibilities could be. I'm not even going to try to dive into what Jesperi Kotkaniemi and Necas being added onto this team could do. I mean, if you wanted to explore that, Necas being put into the top 6 with Doc, Newhook, Slavkovsky, Caulfield, Suzuki, that's a pretty good addition. And then Jesperi Kotkaniemi as a third-line guy, if you really want to believe in him to take the proper steps to move forward under a coach like Martin St. Louis that is known for being able to motivate players and teach young players the ropes in the most beneficial way possible, I mean, look, the way that Jesperi Kotkaniemi was coached in Montreal when he was here, it wasn't really in a way that was like, yeah, we're going to try to improve you in particular. We're going to try to make the Stanley Cup playoffs. We're going to try to go far. Well, we still have Weber and Price and Edmondson and Sherratt and Gallagher and Deneau and all these dudes, and they ended up making the finals because of it. Great. Kotkaniemi was a pretty big part of that team, too. Now, I'm not saying that the Canadiens are not going to try to make the playoffs this year, but it's just Marty St. Louis has been such a good guy when it comes to developing these younger players that what's one more, right? Like, would it not be interesting to see St. Louis work his magic on Kotkaniemi, see if that works in making him a better player? If Kotkaniemi is actually good again, then maybe there isn't a reason to buy him out. Who really knows? But of course, Montreal is Montreal, and if this guy becomes good, then, hey, there's going to be a huge conversation as to whether or not that's sustainable, and if he starts to decline a little bit, then Montreal's going to freak out again. It just kind of happens like that. The city is wild, right? But either way, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about the idea of Jesperi Kotkaniemi being added on to a Marty Necas trade to make that Necas cost cheaper. Is this an idea that you like? Do you vibe with this? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this British Ash 99, and bye.